Okay, in this video, we're going to look at figuring out the building construction requirements based on building size and occupancy. So in previous videos, we've looked at some key components that you need to have in order to do this. So the first thing you need to know is your building area. The second thing you need to know is your building height in stories. The third thing you need to know is the number of streets that your building is facing. Not always, but most of the time. I shouldn't even say most of the time, but sometimes you need to know that. And the last thing you need to know is your major occupancy classifications in the building. So it could be one or it could be multiple. And we've looked at all four of those situations in other videos. So once you have those four things, then you can move on to determining the required construction requirements of your building. And the requirements that will be flushed out through this process will be whether your building needs to be of non-combustible construction as opposed to combustible construction, whether your building needs to be sprinklered or whether it can be non-sprinklered. This will determine your fire separation requirements at floors and also will determine whether your roof requires a fire resistance rating. Okay, and so where we'll go for this is your Volume 1, Division B, and we're going to go into Part 3, and we're going to be in 3.2. And in 3.2 here, we've looked at various other articles in here already in different videos. I'll just flip through some of them really quick. So storage garage considered as a separate building. I believe we've discussed that. 322 is primarily where we're going to be here. And this is your building size and construction relative to occupancy. So in here, we've already looked at buildings with multiple major occupancies. We've looked at whether they're superimposed major occupancies. We've looked at how many buildings, the streets situation, how many streets your building would face are some of the key ones we looked at there. So where we're going to go ahead to this time is at 32220 is where this kind of starts. So what you'll see here on the left here in the bookmarks is, a whole bunch of Group A Division 1 articles, Group A Division 2 articles, and Group A Division 3 articles. You see a bunch of articles for Group Bs and the different divisions. You see some articles here for Group Cs and, relating to building sizes basically, and so on and so forth. So you got your E's and your F's down here as well. And so what we're going to do here is I'm just going to flip. I'll just pick one. Let's just say we go to 32232, and if we read this, this is specific for a building that's a Group A, Division 3, 1 story high, with an increased area, meaning it's just got an increased area from a different article that's kind of similar to it, basically. And then all these parameters are spelled out, basically. If the building ended up being classified in this group, then all the parameters would be explained in that article right there. So what we'll do is we'll just look at some examples of how this works, and we'll start with a single occupancy building. And I'll show you how this works. So let's just say we had an 1,800 square meter Group E building, okay, so a mercantile building. It's got a building area of 1,800 square meters, and it's 1 story in building height, and it's facing 2 streets. So now we want to figure out what's the construction requirements for a building of this occupancy type, of this size, of that many stories, and facing that many streets. So let's just dive into the code here and figure this out. So in the code, I'm going to scroll down to the Group Bs because we know it's a Group B. Now, when you get to the selection of groups where they're combined, what happens here is it starts with the most restrictive situation. Okay, so a Group E, any height, any area. So that would be like a massive Group E building, like a mall or something like that. So it starts with the worst case scenario. So probably the higher risk one, the largest building, that type of situation. The tallest building, and then it kind of works its way down to smaller and smaller buildings. So what I'm going to actually do here is go down to 32269 at the kind of the last part of the Group E items, and we'll see that the first article here relating to Group E in 32269 is it's a Group E building up to 2 stories in building height and sprinklered. Okay, so we're trying to determine whether we need to be sprinklered or not. So let's just start with this article and say, okay, well, we're group E, so we meet that requirement. And the building we have here is only 1 story in building height. So we're good. We're not beyond 2 stories. So that's fine. Now we just got to continue reading through here. So a building classified as group E is permitted to conform to sentence 2, provided the building is sprinklered throughout. Okay, so if we classify the building under this article, we know now we have to sprinkler it. Can't be more than 2 stories in building height, and here's the building area information. So the building area cannot be more than 3,000 square meters if 1 story in building height. Okay, so back to our scenario here, we're only 1,800 square meters with 1 story. So we meet that requirement. We're less than the 3,000 square meters at 1 story. If we were 2 stories, I picked a number that was kind of bang on there, but even if we were 2 stories at 1,800 square meter building area, then we'd be fine as well. And then sentence 2 pretty much just tells you, okay, what it has to be. So the building referred to in sentence 1, so this building here, we meet these requirements, is permitted to be of combustible construction or non-combustible construction. So we know now that we could build this building right here out of wood or out of something non-combustible, so steel or concrete or whatever. So, but the option there of wood exists for this building. And it also goes on to say you can use the non-combustible and combustible in combination as well. So it doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be together. Floor assembly shall be fire separations with a fire resistance rating of not less than 45 minutes. Okay, so if we had a floor, we wouldn't in this case because this one doesn't have a basement. So, a Group E building would typically, I mean, I suppose it could have a parkade or something like that, but again, that would be stories below grade. But if we had a 2-story building, we would now know that the floor would have to be a fire separation and have a 45-minute fire resistance rating. And then any load-bearing walls, columns, and arches supporting that floor would need to have obviously the same fire rating as the floor itself, or else what's the point? And so that tells us now what our building has to be. So we know we got to sprinkler it, and we can build it pretty much out of whatever we want, and we got to do 45-minute floors. It doesn't mention the roof, meaning there's no requirement on the roof. Okay, so the code tells you what you have to do. Okay, if it doesn't mention it, then you don't have to do it, basically. So if there's no mention of the roof, then we don't have to do anything with the roof. And so based on our building parameters, we know that 32269 works, but we got to be sprinklered. What if the desire was not to sprinkler this building? Okay, so maybe the owner says, I really don't want to sprinkler that. I don't want to, pay the extra cost for the sprinkler system. So let's just see if that's possible. So we're just going to work our way up from our first article in the Group E series, basically, and we're going to go up to the next article. And you'll see that the next article is a Group E, 2 stories, but it doesn't say sprinklered. Okay, so what that means, if this article works for us, then we wouldn't have to sprinkler the building. So again, the building code's saying what you have to do, not what you don't have to do. So if the word sprinklered doesn't follow it, then this is an article for a non-sprinklered option. So let's just look at this. So the building's Group E, yeah, that's us. We're not more than 2 stories in building height, and our building area can't be more than the value in table 32268. So this table right here. So we're 1 story. We said that we were facing 2 streets in this scenario right here. Okay. So we're 1 story facing 2 streets. So the maximum building area is 1250 square meters. We are 1,800 square meters. So what that means is can't use this article. Okay, so this is, let's see if I can write on this thing. I don't think I can. Oh, I can. That's no good for us. Okay, not going to work for our building. This one worked. That one does not. So let's just keep going up here and see what our next option is. And remember, as we move our way up through the Group E buildings or in here, articles in here, it gets more and more restrictive. Basically, it gets into a more risky, I guess, scenario, and the safety requirements kind of increase. So here's one Group E up to 3-story sprinkler. Well, we've already determined in the other article that we can use that one for a sprinkler situation. We're trying to get around sprinkler. We don't want a sprinkler, so let's just keep going up. So we don't want that one. Because basically, and I guess just to touch on that, we wouldn't use it if we determined that we had to sprinkler it, we would still want to use this article here because the requirements, the safety requirements on the building will be less stringent than the article up here. Okay, so you start off looking for the least restrictive requirements. Okay, so we're gonna say no to the 32267 because it's a larger building. So if we read through this, there would be something in there that would probably be more restrictive to what we're doing. So we'll just skip that one. Here's another option that's not sprinklered. So let's just see if this one works for us. So we're Group E. We're not more than 3 stories in building height. We're only 1. And the building area can't be more than what's in this here. So we're 1 story. We're facing 2 streets. And the maximum building area is 1,500 square meters. So again, we're 1,800. So we can't use that one. Okay, we've gone beyond that, not an option. So let's go to the next one. Group E up to 4 stories sprinklered. Okay, well, we're trying to get around sprinklering. Next one is Group E, any height, any area sprinklered. So like kind of the worst case scenario. So if you don't fit into any of these other articles, you're going to end up in 32264. So the sprinkler. So what that tells us here is that this building, based on these parameters, has to be sprinklered. There's no way around it as far as the code's concerned. And so we end up right where we started, and now we would say this building is classified under section 32269, article 32269. These are the parameters for our building. So we know now that our building is going to be sprinklered. It's got to be, couldn't get around it, we tried. And we're going to have to do our floors at 45 minutes, which we don't have a floor in this case, so it doesn't really matter. So that's kind of how it works. So you start by going to the grouping of the group you're in, the occupancy group you're in, and you look for the least restrictive article that you can use on your building. Okay, so now let's look at another scenario of a little bit more complex building, but again, we'll do one major occupancy classification in it. Okay, and now let's just say this time we have an A2 building, so we have an assembly type use, so maybe a restaurant, and it's 600 meters squared in building area. It's 2 stories, and it's facing 1 street. So we go back to our code, and we're going to go to the A2s. So I'm going to start it again. Here's the grouping of the A2s, and again, the first one is the most extreme situation of any height, any area. So I'm going to start at the bottom, and let's first find the least restrictive requirement for this building. So our A2 start right here, and a group A2, the first article is for a 1 story. Okay, an A2 of 1 story. Well, we're 2 stories, so we know we can't use that one. Okay, that one's off the table right away. Okay, let's go to the next article. A2 up to 2 stories sprinkler. Okay, that sounds like it could work for us. It's telling us we're sprinkler, but let's just see what's in here. So the building's permitted to be of combustible or non-combustible construction or used in combination. So we could build it out of wood or steel or concrete or whatever. It's got to be sprinklered. Okay, we've already figured that out from there. Not more than 2 stories in building height. We're good there because we're 2 stories. We're not more than 2 stories. And our building area is, what did I say? We said 600 meters squared. So the building, and we're facing 1 street. So it actually doesn't even matter. This one doesn't even look at streets. So this is an example where the streets don't even matter. But we are, the building area can't be more than 600 meters squared if 2 stories in building height. Okay, that's us. We're 2 stories and we're 600 meters squared. So this article would work for us. Okay, so we could classify our building as that one. Let's just see if we can pull this off without sprinklering the building again. And probably not with an A2 because it's a higher risk scenario. So the next one up here is sprinklered again. So we don't need to see that one. We're trying to see if we can't sprinkler it. Well, here's an option right here. So A2 up to 2 stories. So this would be not sprinklered. So this one right here, we're not more than 2 stories in building height. Our building area, we're 2 stories and we're facing 1 street, and the maximum allowed is 800 square meters. Okay, so we were 600 square meters. So that's good. So far we're checking out here. And now we're going to, sentence 2 always gets into what are the requirements. So this one works, okay, because we're in A2, we're not more than 2 stories, and we have not exceeded facing one street, we've not exceeded the 800 square meters. So we could use this article. So now we have an option. Um, we could choose to use this article right here where it's sprinklered. And if we look through this, there's no requirements here. So that's pretty easy going. So there's nothing there saying that your floors have to be 1 hour or 2 hours or anything like that. So, and the reason for that is because it's sprinklered. So it's saying, yep, if you got that building, if you classify it as this article, then we don't have to fire rate that floor. There's no fire separation on that floor with any minutes required to it. But if you decide to do that building based on this article right here, if you decide not to sprinkler that building, then let's find out what we got to do to this building. So again, it can be combustible or non-combustible construction or used in combination. So that's fine. It was kind of the same as the other one. But now the floor shall have, or the floor shall be a fire separation, and if of combustible construction, shall have a fire resistance rating of not less than 45 minutes. So you got to be careful when you read these sentences. So the floor now has to be a fire separation, but it only has to have the time assigned to it if it's of combustible construction. Okay, so if you built that floor out of wood, then you'd have to put the 45 minutes on it. If it is built out of concrete or steel, it just needs to be a fire separation. So you can have a fire separation with 0 minutes assigned to it. And basically what that is like a smoke seal. Okay, so smoke wouldn't get through it. If you have a mezzanine, then if it's of combustible construction, then it has to have 45 minutes. The roof assembly shall have a fire resistance rating of 45 minutes if it's of combustible construction, except if you're not more than one story in building height, then you don't have to do that fire resistance rating, but we're 2 stories, so that wouldn't apply to us. And we already know that the building area is not more than 800 meters squared facing one street, so we are 600 meters squared, so that's fine. And then basically the article, the sentence D here is just saying, whatever your assemblies are, your horizontal assemblies are, your load-bearing items supporting those assemblies have to have a fire resistance rating equal to, basically. So in this case, we could decide whether to sprinkler the building or not. Now, obviously, if we choose this article and not sprinkler it, there's more requirements on the building, which makes sense because the sprinklers bring a level of safety to the building. And then you just make the decision. Okay, so that'd be a conversation you would have with your client and ask them, like, do you want to sprinkler this thing or not? Is not sprinkling this thing causing a problem in the design? Because now you got to do the floors as fire separations and so on and so forth. So that's kind of how that works. So in that case, you could have a choice of which one you want. And so basically that's the process for a single occupancy building. Okay, so now let's look at a situation where we have multiple major occupancies. So in this building here, we're gonna say we have a on the main floor, we got a group E going on there. We got a group D going on there. So maybe this is a clothes store and this is a dentist or something like that. On the second floor, we've got the group C on there. So we have multiple major occupancies in this building. None of them are minor occupancies, they're all major, just based on the way I've demised this thing. So remember from previous videos, you have to consider the entire building as each one of these occupancies for the purposes of doing what we're doing here. So we have a group E building that is 2 stories in building height, facing 2 streets, and is 1,600 square meters. We have a group D building that's 2 stories in building height, facing 2 streets, 1,600 square meters. We have a group C building that is 2 stories in building height, facing 2 streets, 1,600 square meters. And so now the process is the same as what we did with the single occupancies. We just do it 3 times basically. So we're going to look at this building as each one of these groups and look for the least restrictive for each group classification, and then apply the most restrictive of the 3, basically. So let's start by going for our group E. So we're again 2 stories, 2 streets, 1,600 square meters. Okay, so group E. So again, I'm going to start at the bottom of the group E's and see what we end up with here. So our group E's start right here. So group E up to 2 stories sprinklered. So okay, we're 2 stories, so that's fine. Got to sprinkler it though, and the building's not more than 2 stories in building height, and the building area can't be more than 1,800 square meters if 2 stories in building height. So we were 1,600 square meters at 2 stories. So this article works. We could use that if we want. Now again, it's forcing us to be sprinklered. Let's just see if we can get away with this building as a group E, not sprinklered. So we'll go up to this one right here. So we're 2 stories and we are facing 2 streets, and the maximum is 750 square meters. So we're beyond that. Okay, so we're 1,600 square meters. So that one does not work. Okay, so we're gonna keep going up here, see what our next option is. So again, that's sprinklered. So we've already determined one with a sprinkler, so we don't need to look at that. Let's try this one right here. Group E up to 3 stories. So we're only 2 stories, that's fine. We are facing 2 streets, so you could do up to 1,500 square meters with this one, but we're over that, we're 1,600 square meters. So this one does not work either. And I think the rest of the ones in group E are all sprinklered, and they are. So that would tell us, we already know, without even looking at this now as a group D, okay, or the group C, we already know we're going to sprinkler it. Okay, so we've found the least restrictive of the group E, and it's sprinklered. We cannot get away with not sprinklering this building, no matter what the outcome of the other two is. So we know that already. So I'm going to jot that down as this building is going to be classified as 32269 as one of the options. Not one of the options. It is. It is a 32269 building so far. And so I've just written that right here. So 32269 we know is going to apply to us. You know, we could just browse through this and be like, well, what are the requirements on that? So it looks like we could be wood if we wanted. And the floors have to be fire separations and 45 minutes. Okay, so that's pretty much it. So now let's look at this building as a D. So again, I'm going to start at the bottom of the Ds. And we already know we're going to be sprinklered. So just for fun though, let's see if we could do this not sprinklered and see what happens. So group Ds start right here. So the first one's sprinklered. Let's just go to the next one and see if it's not sprinklered, just out of curiosity, if this would allow us to be not sprinklered. So we'd be 2 stories, and we were facing 2 streets at 1,000 square meters. So actually we're 1,600 square meters, so we couldn't use that article. That would not work for us. Next one's sprinklered, and the one above that is, let's just see here. Let's try this one right here. So we're less than 3 stories and facing 2 streets, and you're allowed up to 3,000 square meters of building area. So we're only 1,600, so we could use Article 32260, but we already know from the E that we got to sprinkler it, so we wouldn't actually do that. I was just looking at that out of curiosity. So let's go back here and see if this article applies. So group D up to 3 stories sprinklered. Like, I guess what I'm saying is if we already know we have to sprinkler it, then there's no point in classifying it as another article that's going to tell us we need all these requirements on the building under that group D when we already know we're sprinklered from another article. So you might as well choose the sprinklered one out of the Ds and get less requirements again, basically out of the Ds, because what we're going to do is we're taking the least restrictive of each group, but applying the most restrictive of the outcome of the 3. Okay, so let's take a look at this one right here. 3 stories, sprinklered, and the building areas are massive here. So, you know, we're 2 stories and you can go up to 7,200 square meters. So this one easily works for us. So, and again, we could be combustible or non-combustible. So you could build this out of wood. Floors, got to be 45 minutes if of combustible construction. So they got to be fire separation, but only require the minutes if of combustible construction. If we have a mezzanine, it's got some requirements. So, you know, so there's a little bit more requirements in that one right there than that E one, I think, just off a quick look. So I'm going to jot that down. That one works for us, 32261. Now, again, obviously, if I go forward to the more restrictive ones, it's going to work because eventually it gets to any height, any area, right? You know, group D up to 6 stories and all that kind of stuff. So at some point, they're all going to work, but we're going to take the least restrictive of the D, which is the 32261. And so I've just written that down. So 32261 applies from the D perspective. So now let's look at our C situation here. So we're going to go to group C's, and we're going to start at the bottom here. And the first group C is sprinklered, so let's just check this out. Building sprinkler, not more than 3 stories, that's us. And you know, the areas are big again, so we're only 2 stories. You're allowed up to 2,700 square meters. We were 1,600, so that one works. And again, you're allowed to be combustible or non-combustible. So basically, we already know now this building could still be made out of wood, because all 3 articles have allowed, looking at it as an E, as a D, and a C, we know we got to be sprinklered because the E forced it. But they all said that it can be combustible or non-combustible. So at this point, we could decide if we wanted to build it out of wood or not. And then if we just look through the rest of the requirements here, floor assemblies shall be fire separations with 45 minutes, regardless of construction type. And the mezzanines has some requirements. So, you know, just at a quick glance, it's not much different than I think the D that we were just looking at. Let's just see if it would have been possible to do this not sprinklered as a C, just out of curiosity. So the next one was sprinklered. Oh, you know what? There is no not sprinklered for C, it looks like. You're, as soon as you're group C, it looks like you're always sprinklered no matter what. By the looks of things. So there you go. So now we found the least restrictive requirement of each one of those groups, and now we're going to apply the most restrictive of whatever we got, which I think in this case, the most we're going to have here is floor assemblies of fire that are fire separations with 45-minute fire resistance rating. So that's what the C gave us. There's nothing here about a roof. Okay, we don't have to worry about that. We'd have to check if C or sentence 3 applies to us, which I don't think it does because it's dwelling units more than 1 story, which wouldn't be us. In a building in which there's no dwelling unit above another dwelling unit, the fire resistance rating on the floor assembly is entirely within the dwelling unit is waived. I don't think that applies to us either, but you have to read through those. So yeah, it looks like we're at a fire separation with 45 minutes. And so these are the 3 articles that apply to our buildings. So now we're just going to look at those one more time and see what are the most, let's find out what does our floor have to be, basically. Let's just look at that as an example. So, we found the 3 least restrictive in each category, and now we're going to apply the most restrictive for the floor. Okay. So just back to the building code here, we'll start with a 32269. Yeah, sure, 32269, we'll start with that one, the group E one. So that one there, fire separation with floors and 45 minutes. Okay, so we're going to be a fire separation, and it's going to have 45 minutes regardless of whether it's wood or non-combustible. Okay, next we will go to the D, 3226. And that one there, the floor assemblies shall be fire separations, but only have to have the 45 minutes if it's of combustible construction. But the E has overridden that because it's more restrictive than this one. So we're going to, regardless of what this one says, we're going to take the most restrictive of the 3. So far we are going to be a floor assembly with a fire separation of 45 minutes, even if it's made out of steel, because the other one didn't say if of combustible construction. So the E has overridden this one in that case. And now let's just take a look at the final article here, which was the C of 32254. And this one here said the floors shall be fire separations with a fire resistance rating of 45 minutes. So it was the same as the E requirement there. So now we know the floor in this building has to be a fire separation and have 45 minutes assigned to it. A fire resistance rating of 45 minutes. None of them said anything about roofs, so we don't have to worry about the roof. And that's how you deal with multiple occupancies, basically, in a building. So you classify the whole building for each one of those Um, and then you find the least restrictive of each classification and then apply the most restrictive. And so now when this goes in, for the building code summary, in the drawings, when it goes for building permit, it would be classified as all three of those with the summary of the outcome of those. And then just one thing to remember, if this was a situation where, um, let's just say that the D, I'm trying to think what that could be, whatever, it's a little accountant office, let's just say. So a little accounting office sits on the corner right here, that's your D. And it's less than 10% of the floor area that it's in. Let's just say that D was less than 10% of this floor area. It's not a major occupancy anymore. It's a minor occupancy, so we wouldn't have to look at that one right there. That's what would happen in that case. But so just keep that in mind that this is regarding major occupancies in the building. And that's pretty much how you classify your building and find out the major parameters of whether you sprinkler it, whether it's going to be able to be built of wood, and then what your fire separations are for the floors, and sometimes fire resistance ratings for roofs.